Hundreds of prehistoric sites to visit. Most of them are free to get into, but some of them you need to pay to visit. Now this is one of them. This is the site of the Table des Marchands, and behind me we can see the Tumulus de Grah. And the Tumulus de Grah is perhaps one of the most enigmatic monuments in Brittany. We have an ancient burial chamber in the centre here, where you can see there's a large capstone over the top of a burial chamber. There was various ceramics found there and some jewellery indicating that the person buried there was of high status. But as with the rest of Brittany, no human bone. The acidic soils have seen to that. The monument itself extends for quite some distance, and to my right it would have extended several tens of meters further beyond the hedge line, probably built up in steps. And then we have some curious features towards that far end where the side walls continue for almost double the length, or to almost double the length of the entire monument. Now around this central burial chamber we can see from the stones that they sort of built a circular structure around the outside, perhaps terraced or stepped, and then the monument continued off to my right here, probably again built up in terraces or steps. Now according to the excavators, this monument extended for several tens of meters beyond that hedge line. And it's also interesting to note that just the other side of this hedge line is another very famous monument called Mané Lud, which contains an awful lot of carvings. But let's have a look at this monument to the left of me. This monument is aligned almost exactly north-south, so with north away behind me. And more than half of its current length is made up with just these side walls. There's one wall on this side you can see stretching away from me, and we have a little grassy area in the middle, and another wall stretching away to join onto the monument in the distance. There's really not much idea what this area was for, whether it was an intended extension of the monument or whether it was just a ceremonial enclosure. Lots of debate, lots of argument about what this was for. But it's worth noting that we're at the centre of a wider ceremonial landscape. And over to my left, if we look over towards the water, we could see some little white houses, the end of the white houses, and then just beyond them is a small island in front of where all those trees are that you can see. On that small island we have two stone circles interconnected almost in a figure of eight shape, and that's the enclosure of Err Lannic. And then behind these trees to my left here is the world famous monument of Gavrinis, which we're going to visit a little later on. And in front of the trees is the Table des Marchands monument, which we'll look at in a moment. One of the things Brittany is most famous for is its standing stones, or menhir. And what we have behind me here would have been the daddy of them all. This is the Grand Menhir Brisé, which translated means the big broken standing stone. And it would have stood over 20 meters tall when it was vertical. Now, whether it was pushed over or fell accidentally, we don't know, but the pieces still remain here. So the people walking behind me on the path there give you some idea of the scale of just the bottom section of this standing stone, and if we pan around you get some impression of just how big that stone was, but it was one of many. And it's thought that the Menhir was at the end of a line that was orientated from 30 degrees to 210 degrees, and there appear to have been between 13 and 15 other standing stones, all arranged in a straight line. Whether they were all standing at the same time is not clear, but it would seem likely that at one point there was an arrangement of menhirs increasing in size until they reached the 20-meter granddaddy at this end. The menhirs of the Morbihan region in southern Brittany are famous not only for their size, but also for some of the carvings that you find on them. If you've been on my Dolmen de Mané Lud tour, you will have seen some carvings on the Kermarker menhir, and there's carvings also that were found on the Menhir Brisé. But one of the things that we know about these menhirs is that many of them were toppled and broken and then reused to help build dolmens, to help build the tombs of important people. Now this is the Table de Marchands dolmen, and inside here we can see some of those carvings that were first made on menhirs and then reutilized inside the tombs. As we know is a common feature with many of the dolmens in Brittany, they always have this lower entrance, so it's not possible to just walk into them. You have to crouch down. We see that at Cercado, and we see it at many other monuments where crouching isn't enough. You literally have to get on your hands and knees and crawl in. So let's take a look inside the Table des Marchands. As soon as we enter the tomb, we immediately start to see carvings here. Now, it's really not clear what these carvings represent, but this wavy line motif is very common throughout Morbihan, and it's been suggested that perhaps it represents waves on the sea, or perhaps seabirds, or something entirely different. We'll probably never know. But what's unmistakable is up here on the roof of the tomb we can see the unmistakable form of a ceremonial axe. And this motif is found in other places, and it's also a perfect representation of some items that we've actually found inside tombs. Okay. What we can also see here, we have this crook motif that we see on the menhir of Kermarker, and then we've got something coming down here which is tempting to see as a pair of legs and a foot with a skirt or something like that. Now, it's possible that these marks here might represent the horns of a bull, because this was part of a menhir that was split in two, and I believe the other half of this menhir is at Petit-Mont, where you can see some of the other carvings. And Petit-Mont is on the other side of the Gulf of Morbihan. The most immediately impressive stone is the one that faces you as you come into the tomb. The back wall of the monument is covered in multiple crook motifs, but we've also got suggestions here of some squares, so I'm not quite sure what these features are here. Now, one of the things that I like to think is that if we have repeated motifs appearing in different locations, these motifs clearly meant something to the people that made them. Now, if we have symbols with meaning, are we talking about societies and cultures 4,000 years BC in northwestern Europe that essentially had a form of writing similar to hieroglyphics that developed an awfully long time later? There are 4 major paid Neolithic sites in Brittany to visit, and they should be an essential part of your itinerary. That would be Balnanet in the north, in Finisterre, Petit-Mont here on the opposite side of the Gulf de Morbihan, Table des Marchands, and the other one I'll mention in a moment. But please remember that when you visit this site, you're looking at a reconstruction. So the site that originally caught the attention of archaeologists and antiquarians didn't look anything like this when they arrived. Originally, it looked like this. When you come to Brittany, the other site that is an absolute must visit, as paid sites go, is Gavrinis, and we're going to have a look there this afternoon. The Dolmen de Mané Lud lies about 120 to 150 metres north of Grah that we were looking at. And the first thing you notice when you come here is you don't have to pay to get in. Always good. The second thing you notice is this huge capstone. This forms the roof of the burial chamber and also marks the beginning of a long stone cairn that we can see stretching away into the trees. So there are probably other burial chambers here, unless it's like Grah where there was just one. So we can see on the ground the remains of the small stone blocks that formed this cairn when it was originally built. You can see the entrance down behind me to the left here. One of my favourite things when you come here is how you get in, and you can see we've got some steps that run along the side of somebody's house. The reason Mané Lud should be on your list of sites that are must visits are the carvings that lie inside this chamber. So let's go and take a look. So as soon as we enter this passageway, we start to see traces of squares, which have been interpreted as possibly being fishing nets. And this tomb seems to be particularly associated with a group of people who lived on what they could catch and hunt at sea. Now on this stone, we have what has been interpreted by many archaeologists as a representation of a boat. And here's the shape of the boat. And here, the people inside, perhaps going off to fish or maybe even hunting whales. And we have very strong suggestions of whale hunting at this tomb. Here again we have these waveforms, perhaps representations of the sea, or some have suggested, as I said earlier, perhaps birds in flight, maybe seabirds, or maybe just boats. Perhaps these are boats pulled up on a beach. This is covered in them. This stone on the right hand side of the passageway, just before you reach the main chamber, we have down here perhaps more representations of boats, but here are those squares again that we saw in Table des Marchands. More indications of people. This cross shape could be a suggestion of a mast with a crossbeam or a spar. I'm not a sailor, I don't know what it's called. More up here. So again, very strong suggestions of people going off to sea. And then over here, we seem to have a small axe. This little arrangement of dots here is quite curious and reminds me of the large arrangement of dots we find in the Bronze Age tombs up on the coast of Côte d'Armor on the Pink Granite Coast. But this is much, much older. We're perhaps 2,500 years before those Allées Couvertes tombs of the Pink Granite Coast. We have more of these waveforms here. Birds, waves. I have three here. nested on top of each other. And then these three curious holes. I'm not sure whether these are prehistoric or more modern, but they are arranged in a rather curious pattern. And then over on the other side, we have more carvings on this stone with these cross forms and various other motifs on that stone. Now this carving is truly enormous, and we can see here seems to be the body, which I would assume is of a whale. There are suggestions of a tail here behind me, and then we have this. Is that the spout of a whale? And finally, we have the remnants of something on this stone. Now, as I said, this tomb is free to enter, so it must be on your list of sites to visit. There are some others near here. We're near the village of Lochmariacher. Pierre Plat is one of my absolute favourites. But of course, the most spectacular of all of them is Gavrinis. So we're off to Gavrinis. Gavrinis is an island in the middle of the Gulf of Morbihan. So be aware, if you want to visit, you will have to book the boat crossing over to the island. And the numbers of people that can visit every day are strictly limited by the numbers of boats that can operate. So your best bet would be to book in advance. Now the other thing to remember is that Gavrinis is not open all year round. It's only open through the spring and summer months. So if you come here in winter hoping to visit and to see the spectacular midwinter sunrise, you're not going to see it. So the ride over to Gavrinis is a very pleasant way to spend an hour or two on a summer's afternoon. So this is the southern end of the Gavrinis tomb. Just be aware, if you do take the tour here, the tour will be conducted in French, although many of the guides do speak English as well, so they'll be able to answer any questions if you have troubles with the French. So we're standing outside the entrance of the Gavrinis tomb. Now, in similar way to Newgrange in Ireland or Knowth, this has of course been restored, but what you see on the outside is a pretty good stab at what we think it would have looked like when it was first built, and what you see on the inside of this tomb is truly remarkable. When we go inside, I will just film what there is to see and let the stones speak for themselves. One other site you may want to see if you come to the Gulf of Morbihan is very, very close to Gavrinis, and it's a double stone circle or cromlech which lies on the island of Err Lannic. And if you book the right trip, then the boat will take you around the island so you can have a look. And guess what? I've booked the right trip.